Hello everyone and welcome back to our channel A to Z Automation in Java. Let's continue the topic which we were previously discussing. What we were discussing in the previous class is that non-access modifiers, and we have discussed about the static modifier inside that one. So we have discussed the different properties of static keyword. Let me summarize that one. So static keywords and static variables and methods are those variables and methods which can be accessed using the class name in order to call the static variables anywhere. We don't need to create the object of that class. Okay. Another point what was there is that if we want to call the static variables and methods inside the static area, then we can call them directly, but inside the static method we cannot call the non-static values directly. In order to call those, we need to create the object of that class. Static attributes and methods belongs to the class only. These are not bind to any object. The memory allocation to the static values happens only once. At what time? At the time of class loading. Okay. So let's move further and let's start our second final keyword inside the non-access modifiers. Okay, what is that final? If we talk about the final keyword, then we can say that anything which is marked as final, we cannot update the values later on. Okay, the final keyword can be applied to class, variables and methods. Each and everything where we can apply the final keyword. We can apply the final keyword on class, methods and variables. Okay, let's firstly discuss about class. Final class. If we are discussing about the class, yes, we can mark the class as final. But what will happen now? If we are marking any class as final, if we are marking any class as final, then we cannot override this class. What is override here? We cannot extend the class. Extend this class anywhere. Okay. If we try to do this, then it will display the error. Okay. And the second thing here is that final method. What are the final methods? If we are using the final keyword along with any method, then these methods are treated as the final method. And what is the property of these methods? Final methods cannot be overridden. We cannot override the final method. Okay, what is that thing? If we are marking any method as final, then we cannot override this method. Inside any other class. How we can override the method or variable? We can override the method or variable using the extend keyword. If we are extending any class inside another class, then we can override the methods and variables of that class whichever we are extending. So if any method is marked as final, then that method cannot be overridden. We will take up the example of that one later on. Let's discuss about the final variable. Suppose we are marking any variable as final, then what will happen? If we are marking any variable as final, then we cannot declare that variable. Then we can't declare that variable. We cannot just declare that variable. What is the declaration? If we are saying that let's take an example of this one, int a here we declared what we have declared. We declared that a will reference variable a will store integer values in it only. Okay, reference variable a will store only integer values inside it whenever we are going to do that. But as of now we just declare this thing. But if we are creating any variable as final, suppose we are saying that final int a, and we are doing this, then this is not possible. We cannot just declare any variable as final. This will give us the error. Okay, what we have to do, we need to initialize the value to the variable, to final variable at the time of declaration. What it means that whenever we are creating any variable as final, then at the time of creation we need to provide the value to that one as well. Suppose we are doing this, then we need to provide some value like this. At the time of declaration we need to provide the value to the final variable. We can't just declare and leave a variable as a final. Okay, it will display some error. If we are declaring any variable as final, then we need to provide the value to that one as well. Another point is that we can't update the value of final variable later on anywhere inside or outside the class. What it means that, suppose if we want to change the value of this final variable later on, and we are calling this variable inside any other method, and we are trying to update the value of this final variable a from 304 to 244 or something like that, then we can't do this thing. The value of this variable is final now, and we cannot update the value of this variable now. Okay, so let's see the example of all of these. Let's start with final class. If we are marking any class as final, then this class cannot be override. We cannot override the final class. What is override here? We cannot extend that class. We cannot extend the final class anywhere. Let's create one class. Suppose I am taking the example of this test class. Let me mark this class as final. Okay, this is the normal class, and what we are going to do here is that we are going to mark this class as final. Public final class test. Okay, if we are not marking this class as final, suppose this class is not final as of now. Now what we will do, we opened another class. Okay, we opened this class. Okay, so let's extend. If this class is not final, test class is not final as of now, and we are extending, extends test class. What extends keyword do, we have discussed in the previous class. If anyone don't know what extend keyword is doing, is that, then they can go and watch the previous session. Extend keywords copies all the variables and methods of this class inside the current class. Okay, and we are not getting any error here. It means that all the variables and methods of test class are being copied inside this test underscore qrt class. Now what we can do, we can create the object of test qrt class, and we can see that all the variables and methods of that test class will get displayed here. Okay, we created the object of test qrt, but we will see that a, m1, b, m2, that will also get displayed. These are the variables and methods of this test class. Why are these are getting displayed here inside this QWERTY test class object? Because we are extending this class inside test QWERTY class. Extends keywords, what it will do? It basically copies all the variables and methods of test class inside this test underscore QWERTY class. Okay. So now if we are marking any class as final, we cannot extend that class. We cannot override that class. Okay, let me mark this test class as final now. As soon as we mark this class as final, you can see that we are getting the error here. Okay, as soon as we mark this class as final, we are getting the error here. Why we are getting the error? We cannot override the final class. You can see this. The type test QWERTY class cannot subclass the final class. We cannot mark final class as subclass for any class. What is the subclass? The class which we are extending anywhere is treated as subclass. So we cannot extend the class which is being marked as final. Okay, so suppose if we remove this final keyword, then it will again, okay, it will not display the error. It will get removed. As soon as we marked any class as final, we cannot extend that class anyhow. Okay, this is all about the final class. Let's move on to another topic. What is that one? Final method. If we are marking any method as final, then we cannot override this method inside any other class. What is override here is that if we are marking any method as final, then we cannot override. How we are overriding any method? Firstly, I will tell you the summary of override, how we override any method. We can override any method just by extending that class. You can see this, that this is the test class which is being extended here in this test QWERTY. What happens in this case? All the properties of this test class will get copied inside this test QWERTY class. Okay, all the properties of test class are also copied here. These are existing inside test underscore QWERTY class as well. And suppose now we are copying this method again and pasting it here. What happens now? This void m1 method was already existing. Why it was already existing? As we are extending this test class, if we are extending test class inside this test underscore QWERTY class, then this method is already existing inside this test QWERTY class. As we are extending this, we are extending test class inside this class. So this method of test class is already existing here. You can also see and check using this object. Whenever you create the object, you will see this m1 method, obj.m1. You can see this method. This is already existing here. Suppose if any method is already existing here, and if we try to again create the same method, then Java treat this method as overridden method. If we are again creating the same method which was being created in the previous class which we are extending, then this method will be treated as overridden method. It doesn't matter that we are changing the code inside that method or not. We can change that code or we can't. It depends totally on us whether we want to change the code inside that method or not. But what Java will do? Java will check this method definition only. It will not check this code whether we are changing the code inside the method or not. If we are copying the same code inside this method, it's not an issue. Still it will be marked as overridden method. You can see this symbol. This symbol is for override. Here you can see this overrides. It means that m1 method is the overridden method. It is again copied. It is again created, which was already existing here. How it was existing? It was copied from test class inside the test underscore QWERTY class. But we again created the same method. So if we again created the same method, then that will be treated as overridden method. It doesn't matter whether we are changing the code inside that method or not. We can change the code, or if we don't want, then we cannot change. It depends totally on us. But still that method will be treated as overridden method. Okay, now suppose if we are marking any method as final. Suppose if we mark any method as final, then we cannot override this method. So now let me try to make this method as final. As soon as we make this method as final, it is displaying error here. Why it is displaying error now? Because we cannot override the final method. Can't override the final method from test class. We cannot override the final method of test class. Any method which was being marked as final, that cannot be overridden anywhere. The code inside that method is treated as the freeze code. It's being treated as the final code. No need to update that one. So if we try to override that method, then it will display the error in this case. Okay, let's move on to our next topic. What is that one? Final variable. Okay, if we are creating any variable as final, then what will happen? We cannot declare any variable as final variable. We can't do this thing. We can't declare any variable as final. It will display error. Okay, suppose let me take this example. This a variable here. This variable is treated as declared variable. This is the declaration. What we did here is that we declared that a will store. We declared that a will store only integer value in future. Okay, but this variable is not final variable. This variable is instance variable. So suppose if we go inside this method and we now update the value of a is equals to 34, then that is possible. Why it is possible? Because this variable is not declared as final. We can update the value of this variable. And suppose if we are creating any variable as final, the first point which come here is that this, we cannot declare any variable as final. We cannot just declare this variable and we say that we are declaring this variable as final and we will provide the value later on. We can't do this thing. We cannot declare any variable as final. If we are creating any final variable, then we need to provide the value at the time of declaration. We need to provide the value to that variable as well. Okay, if we are creating any variable as final, then we cannot declare that variable. We need to initialize the value to that variable as well. And the second point is that we cannot update the value of final variable later on, inside or outside the class. So suppose if we created any final variable, then we cannot update the value of that variable later on. Suppose now if we try to update the value of this variable, then this is not possible. Why this is not possible? Because we marked this a variable as final. The value of this a variable is marked as 23 and this is the final value now. Now we cannot update the value of a to any other value. The final value of a is marked as 23 now. If suppose we can update the value of b, we didn't mark this b as final, then we can update the value of b. You can see this. The previous value of b was 45 and now the updated value of b was 23. It is not displaying any error. But whenever we are creating any variable as final variable and we are providing any value, then we say that this is the final value of this variable. This is the freeze code. We cannot update the value of this variable now. And if we try to do that, then it will display the error. Okay. So this is all about the final variable. If you like this video, please do comment, share, subscribe, and please follow our channel. Thank you everyone.